Hi everybody and welcome to At Home with Dan. On this episode what I'm going to be doing is bringing you some basic knife skills. So you may have seen a previous episode of mine which is all about kitchen knives and what knives to use and things like that. This one's more a case of actually how to use them and a few basic skills just to help you get on. And with anything, a good kitchen knife skill comes down to practice makes perfect. Everybody begins somewhere, it's just a case of trying to build it up. So today I'm just going to show you a few little hints and tricks just to help you with the basics, and hopefully you can take those and move on from there. So obviously firstly we need to choose a knife. So with me today I've just picked 3 knives. So I've got what is called a cook's knife or a chef's knife. So this is quite a big one. So this is a 10-inch cook's knife. It's a Victorinox brand, rosewood handle. All my knives have just been sharpened. I've also got a carving knife which has serrates on, and then I've got what's a little tomato knife, which is just a small knife, and it's got quite jagged serrates on. So it's called a tomato knife, but it can be used for other things. So I suppose the first thing I'm going to show you is how to sharpen a knife. This is a steel. You can get different variations of steels. This is what's called a diamond steel. And basically to sharpen your knife, you need to hold the steel quite firmly, keep your arm nice and firm. Every steel should have a guard on it. If it doesn't have a guard on it, don't use it because you'll end up cutting yourself. We don't want to do that. So hold the steel at a 45-degree angle, like so. And then with our knife, we want to hold that at a 20-degree angle to the steel. So something along the lines of that. And what we do is just run it from the heel to the toe, and we go from heel to toe and at the same time as dragging down. So in a nice swift movement like that, and then same on the other side. So we do that 3 or 4 times. And as a professional chef, we tend to do this before and after every time we use our knife. And what that does is it just keeps the edge on the knife, so it's already sharp and we just keep the edge on. Because every time you use a knife, it loses a little bit of its edge. Depending on what surface you're cutting on, it can lose its edge faster than others. So today I'm using a wooden board. It's a really nice wooden board. And the knife goes through quite nicely, quite gently, and it doesn't take too much to go through. I also have some of the kind of Fibrox plastic boards, which are very good for a knife. I wouldn't use, I know a lot of these people get these like glass chopping boards and marble and granite, and because it looks good in their kitchen and it goes with the kitchen, it ruins your knives. Makes them really blunt, so you've got to really keep them sharp. And actually just the sound, I think when you cut through onto glass, it just sounds horrible. Makes me cringe a bit. So I'm using the wooden board, got the knife nice and sharp, and it means it rolls through nicely, like so. So for some of the demos I'm going to do, I've got a few different bits of vegetables here and hopefully just show you some kind of different cutting skills. And a couple of different variations of cuts as well, so there's different ones and they all have French names. And I'll talk you through those as we go. So the first thing is, I suppose, the motion and holding of the knife. So basically hold the handle nice and firm. I don't know if you can see that on the camera there, but I tend to have my index finger kind of almost hooking over onto the knife, so I hook it around this part, just however you feel comfortable. Some people hold it just on the knife like that, some people actually go into the blade and kind of pinch the blade with the finger and thumb, like so, whilst holding the blade. Whatever you feel comfortable with. Actually pinching it with your finger and thumb whilst holding it gives you quite a lot of stability over the knife because you've got a hold of the blade as well. Obviously just make sure that your fingers never go below the blade. So a good way just to get into the rhythm of it and the routine of it is to actually just hold the knife on the board and just think of a cutting motion. And if you just cut through like that, and you get your hand and your body and the muscle memory used to doing that kind of motion. And that's a good one to do before you get your other hand in the way. Just to do that, sit and do that. Keep it nice and controlled. And then you can even do it with this hand as well, but with nothing in the way. So when we're cutting things, top tip is to always make sure the toe of the knife or the tip of the knife remains on the board. So people start cutting themselves when they start lifting the knife up. So you may see people do this, And when you do that, that's when you run the risk of getting your fingers underneath. If you keep the knife on the board, it reduces the risk of like cutting yourself and injuring yourself. So if you keep the knife on, so basically push through the tip of the knife all the way to the heel, and you should be able to do that without lifting the knife up off the board. So as we do that with the knife hand, with our other hand, we need to make a claw. And basically what we're going to do, sounds quite scary, but we're going to run the knife up against our finger. But as long as we're in that claw position, if you go like that, a lot of people go like that, or they'll put vegetables in their hands like this, and actually you can get your fingers easily. What you need to do is grip it like a bit of a claw. So when you're in a claw, because the knife is up against this part of your finger in your hands, you essentially, as long as you don't lift the knife up too high, you can't really cut yourself because all your fingers are out of the way. And again, practice makes perfect. I don't expect anybody to be able to do this first time. Just be careful, be mindful of when you do it. I say that you shouldn't be able to cut yourself, but I do have plenty of scars on my fingers to prove otherwise. You live and you learn. So what I'm going to do is go through some of those motions. And I think actually one of the best things to practice on is a mushroom. It has the least amount of resistance in it, so the knife cuts through really easily, it doesn't get caught or it doesn't wobble around. So as well, when you're beginning out and you're learning to do this, always try and work on a flat surface. So I've cut the stalk off the mushroom so it's flat and it just stops it from wobbling around. And basically what we've just said in the principle, put the knife on the board, so you've got the tip of the knife on the board, we put a mushroom in the way of the blade, we've got our hand in the claw position, and just very slowly and gently we lift, and we just do that rocking motion from front to back. The knife's not leaving the board, the tip is staying on the board, and you go all the way through, and you essentially push the mushroom through with your thumb from behind, but your thumb never goes in front of your fingers, and you're left with a cut-free hand and a perfectly sliced mushroom. So mushrooms are a fantastic one to practice on. Great way to, if you want loads of practice, buy loads of mushrooms, make a mushroom soup and spend time cutting through the mushrooms like that. So I'll just show that again. So we put our hand into a claw, knife on the board, and we just go through. And when you start getting really good at it, you won't even need to look, you'll be able to look up at the camera, talk at the camera, and you can carry on going, and you know because you've got the technique that you're going to get through and you're never going to cut your finger. So that's the rocking motion on a chopping knife. I know this is going to sound really basic and easy, and why are you telling us this? When you're cutting a tomato and you're using, whether you're using a tomato knife or another knife, always do it on the chopping board and just cut it in half, cut it however you want. In my years in the kitchen, I've seen a lot of injuries where chefs hold the tomato like this and then go like that with a knife. And yeah, fair enough, I've managed to do it there, but I'm using a small tomato knife. I've seen chefs do it with knives like this, and they go like that, and the next thing you see, they've put a knife into the palm of their hand. So again, just think about the situation before you start. Make sure everything's going to be safe. Make sure you're comfortable with the knife you're using. So I've got an onion here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this onion in half, so it's nice and level on the board. Just going to cut down through. I'm going to do a couple of things with this. So one, I'm going to cut the stalk out, and I'm going to cut this into slices. So I'm going to follow the lines of the onion, and the same principle as our mushroom, and I'm just going to follow through all the way down the onion. Same principle as we did with the mushroom. Nice rocking motion. So that's a sliced onion, same principle as the mushroom. With this half, I'm actually going to dice it up. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use the small knife to begin with. You can see I've left the core in on this half. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut into the lines, but only up to the core. I'm going to keep the core intact and it holds the onion together. And again, what you've noticed, I've got it on a flat surface. You don't want things wobbling around, because if it wobbles around, that's when you can cut yourself. So on a flat surface, I'm going to follow the lines, but only go 3/4 of the way in. And that holds it all together. And then what you can do with your chopping knife, or you can still just use the small knife if you wish, with your chopping knife, chop down through. And then you've got yourself a nice finely diced onion. I'm going to show you how to do a julienne. So a julienne is basically like a matchstick cut. And in fact I might show you two slightly different ones. So we've got one called a baton and one called a julienne. And they're quite similar, but basically a baton are slightly thicker pieces, like so, like thick strips. And a julienne, using the same principle as the slice, is a thin version of a baton. So it's usually about 2 millimeters square. So julienne is a nice thin strip. Baton is a thicker strip. So I've just done that with some peppers. And then what I'm going to show you with the carrot is how to do a brunoise. So a brunoise is a really fine dice. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a really nice usable piece of the carrot. Again, flat surface always. I'm just going to square this off slightly. So again, using a flat surface every time so it doesn't roll around. So if you try to cut it like that, it's rolling everywhere. So we've got our flat surface. So what I'm going to do is cut some thin slices of the carrot. And then what I'm going to do is these slices of carrot that I've taken off, I'm going to turn these into the julienne. So we've got the slice that way, and then if we slice it this way, we get our matchstick cut, or a julienne cut, so you get nice thin matchsticks. And then to turn this into a brunoise, we then cut it the other way. So essentially, we've cut it into a julienne, and then we're now cutting the julienne into little cubes, tiny little cubes. You may never need to cut anything into a brunoise in your household cookery, but we do things like this for garnishing consommes and stuff when you can see the veg in the soup. So that's a really fine dice or a brunoise carrot. And one more little tip I'm going to give you as well, when you are using a knife, when you're cutting anything and you're using a chopping board. I'm kind of not showing it here because I've put everything on the board and left it on the board so you guys can see on the camera. But when you are cutting things, try and just cut one thing at a time, and then once you finish cutting that one item, take it off and put it to the side so you've always got a full clean chopping board. A lot of injuries and accidents happen when there's too many things on a chopping board and people try to stay away from one thing and they end up nicking themselves because other things are getting in the way. So always try and work clean and tidy, and hopefully it'll make things safer, increase the safety. Right guys, so that's my little tutorial on basic knife skills. I hope it's helped a little bit. If anybody has any questions, contact me on social media. Until then, thank you very much for watching this episode, and take care, stay safe and happy cooking.